there. Good. All right. Well, this is Heretic Happy Hour. Is it happy hour yet? No, I'm joking. I wish. Heretics and the fifth line projection field. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the fifth line projection field always.
Yeah, it's a nice deflection from people scrutinizing us.
Yeah.
You're the one who told me that you wear necklaces sometimes as a way of taking the attention off of just raw Singh.
Well, I recommend anyone with a projection field like accessorize as much as possible.
I don't have any
like,
accessories today. I'm really, this is my problem. I need
You want a hat?
Yeah.
I mean, just
yes,
because,
I want a hat.
like, looking at the projection field, like, even sometimes, like, a second line or a fifth line, it's...
But see, there's no mystery here. If I showed up like this without you seeing the origin of the hat, there would have been a mystery that would have taken away from the mystery of what we're doing and who we are. We don't like being scrutinized for our mystery. It's more like, where did Singh get that awesome shirt? Like, the first thing I said to you when you walked in, love your shirt.
Well, always, like, the less attention on the projection, like, if, like, a projector focuses on it too much, you know, and, like, that's what I think can, like, lead to the fastest disappointment is if there's, like, two, rather than, like, hey, let's look at this, let's look, like, because fifth lines really are just, like, they're, like, they have, like, a bag of tricks, right, like, and it's kind of like a prop comic who's like, hey, look at my puppet, look at what this person says, or check out this, Jonah clearly, like, universalizes human design, like, look at human design, you know, like, it's like throwing practical breadcrumbs so you don't get burnt at the stake.
Yes. So it's like practical diversions. It's almost, and they're all kind of crafted or contrived in some way. We have contrivances. We have gimmicks. I mean, they're gimmicks, right? But the gimmicks work. They have to, and if they don't work, you know, so it's all a gimmick. I mean, if you're in a drum circle and it's getting really boring, pull out a flute. You know, and then it suddenly gets interesting again. Or if you're in a room and it's not, you know, last night we were at Dave's and, I mean, that was incredible, by the way. Who here saw Dave Meyers perform? It was incredible. But I mean, to keep the vibe going, you have to continue to introduce new things. This is like what it is to be a performer. How do you keep it interesting? And then as a fifth line, if the things you're introducing don't work, people go, you know, it's like sing along everybody and it's like a song nobody likes. Like that doesn't work. It's not practical. But if you're like sing along and then everybody loves that song, that's something that will practically engage them immediately.
Yeah, the fifth line is like a revolving door of new things and new people. And I do think like if you have a fifth line personality and you're kind of like whining, oh, I got burnt at the stake, like it's like there is a huge element of it that's like your fault because you're aware of your seductive personality and like whatever cool new shit that you're offering, like that's what people are seduced by. And like if you're not like completely living up to their potential, like it's a huge part of that's on you. And like it's kind of different if you're like a 2-5 or like you're kind of like innocently like seducing and do, but even then like you can do and like watch how like you're seducing people and there are these expectations. So like it shouldn't be a surprise if all of a sudden you're like, well, I didn't know I was gonna get burnt at the stake. There are these like micro like indicators leading up to it where like you can notice people's expectations or what they want from you, because part of being transpersonal is like you have to play a certain role in people's lives, and part of the like savior, like the part of that is just the feeling of like, oh, this person has a role to like play in my life. And so if you can't like live up to some role and you get burnt, then that's on you.
Absolutely. I co-founded the 5152 Facebook group, and it's amazing how the biggest complaint from fifth line personalities coming in there is, how do I get people to stop projecting on me? You don't. That is, and also, you greedy little, I mean, these people, it's like, yeah, they're projecting on you. That means that you join a job where someone else has been working there for 10 years and you're immediately having dinner with the CEO.
Yeah, they're
you're
projecting
getting
the
so
best
much
things
preferential
on you
treatment.
possible.
Yeah, stop complaining that you get preferential
sorry.
treatment. Like, yeah, so sorry that you have a golden key that penetrates every aura. You know, it's like 59.6 on steroids everywhere you go.
Nobody sees you.
Oh. Yeah, I feel so bad. They see you as like this amazing person. Great. Like, text me you, right? But I mean, that's the big complaint. It's like, I went on a trip with my family and they blamed me for everything. Well, you're the executor in all of your bonding relationships. I mean, that was my old joke. I don't know, for those who aren't familiar with the deeper keynotes of bonding, the fifth line has a way of bonding with others in relationship of being the executor of their estate, right? Helping them with the practical things in their life. I mean, there's a lot of not sexy things behind closed doors that fifth lines have to do, right? So my joke with my ex-girlfriend was always, well, yeah, I was flirting with her, but I wasn't doing her taxes. I mean, I'm doing your taxes, honey. I'm your executor. I haven't bonded with her. That's all part of the seduction. I'm seducing her into human design. It's like something that came up yesterday about how projectors will sometimes use sex as a substitute for recognition, hoping that the sex will lead to being able to guide. Well, I will sometimes use attractiveness. I mean, that is the fifth line keynote of attractiveness. Right, we attract, and we want to look attractive, and we kind of are aware of, oh no, that's my bad side. Oh no, but it's not vanity as much as it's, I want human design to be as attractive as possible. We want the things we're universalizing to be as attractive as possible.
And if it's in your personality, you know that you are seducing.
Yeah,
even
you know
if it's
you're
in your
doing
body.
it. Yeah.
If it's in your body, you're realizing, all these people want my body. But there's like an element of awareness, and if you play stupid to that, and like you're like, I don't know why they want to burn me down. There's for sure, if it's in your personality, a part of you is seducing all these people to a bonfire, and you're like, what are we burning? We're putting up a cross. And you're adding the log to the fire, and you're wondering like, why are they like putting me up? Like, you seduced everyone here.
Yeah, that is a really good point. That there's a lot of playing dumb or playing innocent. I'm desire, so one of the transferences of the transference of desire is innocence. One of the ways that will look is this sort of playing innocent, feigning innocent, giving people just enough permission to then get in trouble, and then having culpable deniability, or having whatever they call it. It's like feasible deniability, or however it is. But I mean, it's the same thing being a fifth line, where there's a lot of, this is something that James Alexander said in his Psychology of the Lines talk, which just cut to the core. I mean, he was going through each of the lines, and each of the lines he had these really, really good descriptions. It was almost like kind of Richard Rudd's shadow gift city, but it was in James's terminology, and it was just so astute. Some of them were just so good. And he gets to the fifth line, and I mean, I'm kind of going along with it, and then he says one that just, I think if you're a fifth line personality, this is just like a gut punch. And he says, you will craft stories that omit key details and contrive a way that you escape your own responsibility and guilt. This is the continuity with the fifth line guilt. And the fifth line guilt is, I can fix what I can, and if I see something and I don't do anything, if I see bullshit and I don't shout bullshit, then I am bullshit. If I see a fake and I don't shout fraud, then I am a fraud, right? And that is the guilt continuity with the fifth line, where if you are in a situation where you have contrived it in a certain way, and your contrivance blows up in your face, and then you go, I didn't contrive that. I'm innocent here. It's like the guilt innocence binary. It's like we are actually responsible, because we are continually manipulating, conditioning, directing, encouraging, whatever you want to call it. And then later we can say, well, no, I was just there, but I didn't say anything. But it's like we've built it in such a way.
There's a time to call out fraud too, right? Like if you're universalizing stuff, and like you're like, what, like, if someone's like, I got burned, I'm like, what did you do? What did you say? What did you universalize? Like, there probably is like a chain of events leading up to it. And sometimes you can't universalize things too early. Like, if you see fraud, you can't immediately call fraud. You have to wait till like they escape the bank, like with the money, and you have to like wait for like the certain like legal like steps for you to be able to actually say fraud in the right timing.
Yeah, absolutely. And for fifth lines, I mean, that's incredibly important. I guess my point is, I felt the gut punch of anytime we have a story or a narrative that we've woven, that narrative is going to shine a certain light on us and a certain light on other people. And yeah, you're absolutely right that it's like, we really have to, as fifth lines, I mean, it was kind of advice for fifth lines. It wasn't even that helpful for other people. It wasn't like, if you know a fifth line, you should remind them to do this. It's like, if you are a fifth line, check your own stories, because your stories deny your role in the events, which is, I think, exactly what you're saying. And even if you are saying, I did the right thing, I shouted fraud, well, check the timing you did that. You might have done that at the worst possible time that cast yourself in the best light and cast others in the worst light. And you could have much more gracefully and with much less resistance waited until they had the money in their hands. And then, but because fifth lines can be, there's like 800 million of us out there, right? Or something. I don't know the actual numbers, but there's such a variety of it. And we're learning how to play our role correctly and how to play our role to the hilt, really, it's like, there's a way of playing the fifth line role where you just use the seduction for personal aggrandizement, and there's a way of playing the role, and that leads to the burning. Or there's a way of playing the role where you don't get burned. I mean, when was Ra burned at the stake? He didn't have any allegations of sexual impropriety. He didn't have any allegations. I mean, people thought he was a jerk sometimes, but he wasn't really burned at the stake. I mean, he gives us a really good example of how you can be a fifth line and be a correct fifth line, and you can actually move through the Maya without resistance by giving people practical things.
Yeah, I think he was splenic, and he moved through the world in a way that like kept him like safe. All the, like everything that he did was very like left, but I think the thing that you're getting at is that like there's a level of naivete that comes with a fifth line, and it's because like we like don't like, oh, they're projecting the top of the hexagram onto us, but we see the world through the fifth line, including ourselves. So like there's an idealization that naturally occurs of like seeing something as like better than it actually is, because like we're not like exempt from the projection field. You can see like I tend to like fifth line like artists or musicians. I'm like, oh wow, this new album, like how's it so good? Or like on a person, like it's so easier to be like, oh, they're fifth lining me, but like we do it all the time to things like, and like not seeing the actual like complete part of the hexagram, or like the faults, or like it's interesting because it's like a very feminine like part of it's like a feminine line, so it's like seducing and then disappearing, and then like it's not there all the time. So then
yeah. Well, I've been calling it the cardinal yin. I had, in my last lines class, I went into my own kind of taking gate 64, which Ra does as the blueprint of the lines. So the first line is yin, the second line is yang, and so on. The 5-1 is double yin, but then also looking at it as the cardinality of the fifth lines, starting things. But I had a little comment on that, which is when we think about why is the fifth line doing all this? Why does it matter to give people something practical? Why does it matter to do any of this? In the context of the gate, we have different roles depending on the line. This is how profile expresses, and what the fifth line is doing is it's actually very experiential. The fifth and the sixth line are experiential. They have some continuity with the solar plexus binary. And what the experiential is saying is that it's not enough for Ra, being a fifth line, to say, I had an experience with the voice, it was amazing, now do what I say. He has to give you the experience he had. He's trying to transmit to you the validity of his experience, but not just that you should respect his experience, you can have it yourself. So the fifth line is saying, I had this experience, you'll never get it. That's not universalizing. That's not sharing the experience. It's not expressing it, getting it across. I mean, when we really look at right angle and juxtaposition and left angle and how they fulfill their purpose, the left angle is really here to have their experience and do something with it. And if it's a sixth line personality, what they're doing with it is they're really putting it into practice, and they're no longer in the theoretical realm. They're living it. They're the living example. But if you're the fifth line, it is very contrived. You don't need to be, it is very biased in that sense. It is very opinionated. It's actually putting skin in the game and gambling with their reputations. So you can trust a sixth line if they're really living their design, because they see so much and they have so much integrity. They're no longer hypocrites, and they're living and embodying their integrity. But you can see the fifth line, you can trust them because of their track record. And it's like, well, he might be a hypocrite. He might tell one person this is the most important thing in the world and tell somebody else don't bother. By the way, sixth lines do this as well, but they do it in a different way. But I guess my point is, if we think of what the fifth line is actually trying to do, what is universalization? It's saying there's a valuable experience that nobody else has. and I've had it, and you should have it too, because if you have it, it will provide value to you. And so that fifth line is doing a retrieval process. The left angle is always looking to the past. Something Rob pointed out is that the right angle is here for the future. So the program is sort of future oriented because it has 7 right angle profiles that are continually searching for the future, seeking into the future, going into the future, and kind of naively, innocently going into the future. And what the fifth line is here to do, along with the 6-2 and so on, the whole left angle is sort of the department of review and what was worthwhile and what can continue on and what can persist into the future from the past. And so if the fifth line has an experience that they find valuable, it might take them 5 years, as it did with Ra, to convert that 8-day experience into something practical that others could then use to have a similar experience. But it is about transmitting experience. Now, of course, we have type, and type and role are very different things. I know that Ra was working on the directory at one point, I think he put out, which was the 48 combinations of type and profile. And depending on your type. And now for me as a generator, I'm here to just get the tennis ball, hit the tennis ball back. So for me being a 5-1 generator, the best advice I can give if you're a 5-1 generator as well, or possibly a 5-2, although they kind of get away with more because being a second line, they have a different quality there. And it is interesting the difference in the 5-1 and the 5-2. But as a generator, for me it's important to hit the ball back in the sense of not allowing a snowball effect to build up. For a manifester, I think it's more important to help them and get out of their aura, because the manifester impacts by leaving.
Always get out. I assume you have to get out too at some point, because if you stay too long, you're inevitably...
Yeah, the fifth line has a lot of continuity with the manifester. I mean, you see from type to role that there are certain ones that just make sense. 5-1 manifester is like the fifth line, familiarity breeds contempt, manifester impacts by leaving, like help them and get out of their aura, yes. But you all know at the conference, I've done my best to respond to everything that comes into my field. And I've done my best to respond immediately, because if I wait a day, there's a higher expectation. If I wait 2, there's an even higher expectation. That's not going to work for a manifester. You're not here to hit the ball back every time it comes to you. You're here to help and get out. Now, there's going to be some tricky parts where it's like I keep helping, and the expectations keep coming, and then I might make a mistake, and that one mistake, it's like exposing me to more risk of mistake. It's kind of like you're at a restaurant, there's nice music playing in the background, nobody notices it. Then they hit a wrong note, everyone goes, oh, that band was terrible. They played that wrong note and everything stopped. That's how it is being a fifth line, where as long as you don't make a mistake, it's fine. But you make a mistake and suddenly it's, well, that was supposed to be this, that was, so on. So we really are playing a lot with people's expectations. But there's something else I wanted to just comment on, and it's something that was very interesting to me when I was going deep into lines, which is the difference in the 5-1 and the 5-2. And also the 2-5 and the 3-5. I'd always assumed every fifth line is really hard to see, right? Every fifth line is hard to see who they really are. No, the 5-1 is by far the hardest to see. And it's because of the first line. The first line is the most invisible line to others. The second line gets a lot of attention. Everyone can see into them. And so that's why to the 5-2, they're saying, you can help me and you should help me. And well, for the 5-1, they say that too, because they see the fifth line. But my point is, every other fifth line profile has either a second or a third line. See what I'm saying? And the first line is the most invisible in their cave. Ross says about the first line, if it's a 1-3, you might not even notice them in the room because everybody else is engaged and they're in their books, or they're physically shrinking and hiding, and there's something in the second line's trying to hide, but people still notice them. So it was really profound for me to realize that because we're 5-1s, it's like, at least with a 5-2, you can see they're 2. At least you're like, wow, Dave's got talent. He's amazing. Everyone last night is like, Dave's got talent. He does have talent. That's not a projection. That is, because it always comes with that edge of the second line projection. He has talent and he should do more with his talent, right? That's the second line projection field, is always, for those who have met Von Paul here, it's always, you should make t-shirts. You should do this. The 2-5s and the 5-2s get that. And for the 3-5, people see the third line. They see, oh, here's somebody who's just bumping into everybody and trying stuff out. And I'm not saying it's easy for a third line.
Well, I would argue it's harder to be a 3-5.
It's harder because it's an
Thank you
unconscious.
for
Any of the fifth
acknowledging that.
Any of the fifth lines are going to be hard. Any of the fifth lines are going to be hard. However, it's not harder to fulfill their purpose in this life. It may be harder in the Maya, but for us to fulfill our purpose, I don't think it's harder for anyone to fulfill their purpose, so to speak. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, being a fifth line on the left angle, we fulfill our purpose through interacting with others.
It's always with the other, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 3-5 can go and get chased out of town with pitchforks and still fulfill their purpose.
Well, because it's personal, yeah.
Yeah, it's a personal purpose, which is to see what happens when they did that. And they saw what happened. They learned the price to pay. They've done their job, you know. So yes, they're going to meet more resistance, and my heart goes out to them. But it's not, yeah, exactly.
Thank
exactly.
you for
You
your
get it.
heart.
You get it. So. All right. Well, thank you for that,
That
for
was
letting me
beautiful.
rant a little bit about that. I know Mike was just, he's off screen here, but he was a co-teacher in my lines class for 3 classes, and that was so wonderful. And it was also really nice to kind of, I think it can be nice having another person sometimes to deflect from the projection field as well. Like when it gets to a little.
I like anything. I like PowerPoints. Like when I was like going through school, like I was always like showing PowerPoints in school, whatever I was presenting. Like any like tool, if you're like anything to like be like, look at this, you know, like look at my bag of tricks. I got a rabbit, I got a hat, I got a wand, you know, like.
What's he gonna pull out next?
Yeah. You know, Jonah will drop jokes. Like look at this new thing I heard from Rod. Like it's like. Because people expect something, so if you can at least be like, yo, I had this book, it reminded me of you, take that. You know, I can't fix all of your childhood trauma, but this like movie is like probably gonna win some awards, and you might like it, yeah.
Yeah, I can't fix childhood trauma, but that's a really good show. You should watch the show. Yeah, no, it's true though. It's true. I have a quick comment here, which was long before I was into human design. I think this might just be a fifth line attunement to expectations. I was doing a lot of philosophy and critical theory, and I came up with the whole theory. I was making a lot of music then, and it was a theory of the aesthetics of music that had to do with expectation and surprise, and basically kind of order and chaos at a really fundamental level. And it was saying that if you don't give anybody anything to expect, then you have to build the expectation. This is how the seduction works. But you have to surprise them, and they can't know from the beginning how it's going to end. So I was always analyzing music in terms of when it gets boring and when it needs a surprise to, you know, and then that later turned into an essay I wrote called Negative Transference as an Artistic Strategy. And those who are familiar with psychoanalysis will know there's positive transference where somebody really likes you, and there's negative transference where you really intentionally make them dislike you, or you put up a barrier. And what my argument was that a lot of poor art actually gives people what they want, but ends up just being trashy junk food art. And that really good art, similar to really good therapists or really good teachers, they sort of get you to invest and test you a little bit and make you, you know, feel a little pain that you have to get through. So for instance, Lacan, the famous, you know, analyst, he would start smoking right in the middle of someone talking to him, and they would be so annoyed with him. And I think he was a 3-5 actually. Maybe he was a 4-6. No, he's a 3-5, I think. But anyway, or he would just do these things, but he knew if they came back after that, they were more invested. And what I realized was that I was really developing a theory of seduction, of gaining interest, and that you can't seduction is not just being only attractive. It's the tempering that by putting in challenges. I mean, Ra would do this constantly. He would get you, and then he would say something totally outrageous that if he just started with that, people would be pushed away. So he pulls you in a little bit, then he pushes you away. Then he pulls you in a little bit, then he pushes you away
that's
again.
the heresy. You have to sandwich it in between the meal and like give the whole meal and hope they don't like throw it all back.
Exactly. If you just said what you thought, it wouldn't be in the
there's
trappings.
a craftsmanship of it, you know, and there's always a crafting of like what you're outputting of like even your projection field. You're like, oh, you see me this way? Well, check out this. I can do this. Like I know all this. And so we're also crafting the reputation that we're so like oh, it's precious. Like what if it goes wrong? But like it's very much like our doing as well. The interesting thing I think is like when the expectation for us is like the opposite end. So you know, like instead of like, oh my gosh, wow, if I come across like you're a real piece of shit, I'm like, oh, that's refreshing. Like no one's ever said that to me. Well, let's engage more. I'm tribal. Let's make this long term.
Okay, yeah. Well, and this is there are going to be differences in the chart. I mean, but yeah, no, I like that. I like that. I mean, it's definitely. I loved Alex's talk earlier today, where he was saying that even though he's a manifestor and some people might think certain things about them, that actually he loves to engage. He's not here to respond, but he is here to engage, and that his engagement with people on his terms through his emotional clarity and his processes. But it's interesting, he's a 1-3 manifester, and so getting back to that 48 combinations of type and profile. I mean, being a 5-1 manifester, there's a certain simpatico, right?
I like that though.
You're like,
yeah.
I like it.
It works on many ways because of the profile. There's just like.
Yeah, it's very simpatico. It's something that Mike often says, which is that the Maya reuses assets the same way that a video game engine would reuse assets, and you have the same backdrop and the same thing at different levels, and we can use it here, we can use it there. And so I think this is where a lot of students of human design.
I'm a recycled polygon.
Yeah, you're exactly. They're like 5-1. Let's just use it for the type 2, or it's like 5-1 is like the type of manifestor in some sense, because there's a lot of continuity there. Also, defined ego has a lot of continuity there. If you think about the defined ego wanting to work once and profit forever, and the manifestor wanting to impact once and not have to repeat because they've already done the work. I mean, I'm not saying that these things are the same, just that there are mechanical similarities at different levels, and then there is a sort of a reuse. That's one of the interesting things about human design, is just how it really is a whole world unto itself and a whole vocabulary. And I really liked Alex's response. Were you there at the talk? Did you hear it? Or?
No, I only saw the first part.
Oh, okay. So he got an interesting question. So when he first had his body graph, at that point they weren't. They didn't have computers to do it, and they were doing it by hand, but they did have someone who had a computer that had an ephemeris, and they would send it off. When they sent it off, it didn't have the right time zone. So it came back, and he had an undefined throat, because his throat is defined by the moon. So for a number of years, or at least a number of months, probably over a year, he was not considered a doer. At that point, they didn't have manifestor, projector, generator, reflector. They just had, you're a doer or you're a non-doer. You're a wait and seer, as they would call it. And everyone who didn't have a motor connected to the throat was a wait and seer. So he was a wait and seer, what we would now call a projector. And so he lived his life as a projector for quite some time, until he owed money, and because he had taken a loan, all these things, and he just, something in him was like, just do it. You need to call these people. He called someone, he completely initiated out of the blue, set up something to meet 7 people from them, got 30 readings, made all the money, paid it all off, did it all, and then he came to see Ra, and Ra said, well, I have a special surprise for you. And he took him into the room and he said, you're a doer. And Alok said, I know. and my point in telling the story, though, is that the question was, well, how was it then when you had the wrong chart? And Alex said something really funny. He said, well, we all have all 9 centers, all 64 gates, all 36 channels. We all have enough. I mean, I can't put it the right way he put it, but it was such a wonderful point where he said, we're all going to connect to every aspect of human design. So you give somebody the wrong chart, it's still a certain percentage right. And you know what I mean? Like, you might not be giving them strategy and authority, but there's something when people encounter human design, they have never encountered a logical system that can describe life as accurately, as deeply, as profoundly. And so even just understanding the mechanics of life itself in the Maya can be so helpful, that he already was trusting himself to do what he had to do, and he did it. He was a doer, he did it. But by just learning the vocabulary of the centers and learning the vocabulary of the gates and the channels, and he kind of, it's almost like, it's a little bit like Larry's talk. Who caught Larry's talk on? He had just a wonderful, wonderful talk where Larry Armstead presented on the connection between A Course in Miracles and human design. And I'm not really familiar with A Course in Miracles. I know Randy Richmond Jr. was really into it and was a practitioner. But there are all these lessons that you kind of meditate on. And there are these kind of single lines that can just immediately solve a problem. And what he's found is that they relate to the different undefined center, not self themes. And they do. I mean, it's like reading Ra, right? I mean, it's like something Ra would say. Like Ra would always give these practical little, if you're an undefined throat, don't speak first. And if you're, he would give you these little, or the rhymes of partnership. That's what A Course in Miracles is like. It's like little sound bites. You remember this sound bite? It just takes all the power away from a certain complex that you're in this state of anger, you're in the state of frustration, whatever it is, your spirit is distraught, and then it helps. And what's so funny is people taking A Course in Miracles, everyone gets the same thing, can't differentiate between you and the person sitting next to you. You just get all of them. Some of them are going to work, some aren't. It's just like, let's just cover them all, But what Larry was saying was that, obviously there are connections between one and one of the non-self centers. So I just liked that. I mean, I've heard that before too, where people have said, well, what if it's the wrong chart and this or that? Of course we want the right chart. But learning human design is learning a vocabulary. It is learning how things work. It's learning the laws of the Maya.
I think if you are familiar with the hexagrams in any way, you're gonna see like parallels and through lines with every system and because it's how many thousands of years old, the Chinese, and that was
5,000 probably.
It's every possible scenario in life, everything is kind of already existing in the hexagram, and then when you run that through the body, if you're familiar with human design, any system where there's a person who's awake and they create an entire system and said all these truths, you're gonna see these geometries, and if there's just a line going through it, and obviously we see it through this lens, and to me it's the most practical and the most it's the one that resonates with me the most.
Yeah, it's my preferred vocabulary, but I actually see it when somebody is really against another system, and I hear this a lot, it's because they're still in the state of belief and not yet knowing about human design, because part of them is still wondering maybe human design isn't valid. But if it is valid, what it means is not that human design is valid, it means that the entire reality that human design discusses is valid. And that's something that, I guess it's a subtle point, but just to give it a little example, I like Jonah Blyven's example of how everything emerged in a cyclic nature of planet Earth. So if we think of the origins of life from single-cell organisms and so on, it emerged within the cycles of the day and the cycles of the year. And it emerged, so people would ask, well, why would the neutrino streams affect DNA? Because DNA didn't emerge in a vacuum. It emerged, it's kind of like how scientists think eyesight emerged. Photons continued hitting what was essentially skin. At a certain point, the skin became a mucous membrane, and it was a sort of an opening, and then the mucous membrane adapted and evolved to be able to translate the photons pelting it, and then we have sight, right? And so similarly, when DNA was emerging at that evolutionary moment in history, because it didn't emerge in a vacuum, it emerged in a context, it was being pelted by neutrinos every moment of every day, every year, for just hundreds of thousands of years, for millions of years. And that repetitive cycle created, just like the eyeball receives the photon, the DNA receives the neutrino activation. It's the same thing. It's emerging in a context of continuous stimulus from the outside. And even though that neutrino stimulus is, in the current science, thought to be maybe one or two neutrinos interacts with you in your life, well, over hundreds of thousands of years. So I guess all I'm trying to say is, similarly, if we take that same model for how at a physical level it all works, there's the same thing where in the realm of mysticism, human design is not the first mysticism, it's the last.
Maybe, but I don't because I'm nine-centered, I don't drop all
you don't
seven.
Think it's the last?
I can't drop all seven-centered systems. If someone's oh, that's so seven-centered, I'm dope. That's two more centers than I have. I'll take it. I'll still intake all the seven-centered systems, but the nine-centeredness, it's the seven centers are still part of my nine.
Kind of. I think I have my own theories, but okay. But I do want to say, I also, when I say it's the last, I don't mean you don't need the others. this is something I've spoken with Mike about a lot, and I think we're at a very interesting, I call it the second great meridian of time, the first being 0 AD, because that's sort of the contemporary world's before Common Era. But we're at the second great meridian where we are at maximum population, and we're about to have population decline. And if you think of it as this big prana, this big breath in and breath out, and Mike said something really profound. He said part of the role of the projector is in arrangement and organizing and curating. I don't know if you have a different word, but those are some of the words I've heard you use. And so, but what is it to arrange and curate and organize? We know that the manifestor initiates. They created this world. We're now in a phase where we cannot keep building the world. We're actually finding how to use what has already been built. So I would say a manifestor started every great mystical system up to the last one. And we know that the mystical way is ending. I mean, for those who haven't studied the rave cosmology materials of the mystical way, that's one of the only times I cried reading Ra's materials and hearing them, because it is going away. And there's not a new mysticism coming. But human design is growing, and as it grows, we can see, as you were saying, these deep parallels between the different systems. And what is human design if not a great arrangement of the information that was already presented before? So in the same sense that post-2027, we'll have to find new ways of arranging what's already been built, because people aren't going to be able to build more. They're going to be losing the skills to build more. We're going to find new ways to arrange. Yeah, we can repurpose the seven-centered system. We already have. Yeah. So, but I'm completely with you. And I don't like the dismissal of, that's so seven-centered, especially if it came out after 1781. But I mean, even before that, I mean, there's no reason not to use what we have available. We're left angle. We're here to look at what has value in the past and retrieve it so it can be used in the future. So I completely agree. Yeah, but I do see us at a very interesting point. And it was a great, there was a great question to Alok at the end. It was, so what is the manifestor's role post 2027? Do you have an answer to that?
Well, I think we get to be here. Like, that's what
That's
it
your
is.
role. You get
like,
to be here, yeah.
We get to still be here. Even though, like, it's nothing like what it was. It's not like what we want it to be. Like, I don't have 9 generators, like, serving me. Like, I, like, miss those days. And there's no going back, And, like, the thing is, like, we do have to, like, pay bills and, like, make life work, but we still get to be here and, like, watch everything break down, and then projectors, like, try to pick things back up again.
Yeah, you get to watch the projectors and say,
it's really fun.
Now you try and do what I did.
Exactly.
I built it, and now you guys figure out how to use all this. Yeah. Well, there was a great answer. He said, I have the perfect answer. He said he has the perfect answer because he asked Ra the exact same question. What is the role of the manifestor after 2027? And it's find your pasture. I really like that. Find your pasture, Where is a pasture? By which he basically said, find your place where you can witness, and I mean, putting it kind of in my own words, but kind of as you were saying as well, see what's going on in the world, not be out of touch with the world, but not necessarily have to be in the middle of the world. I mean, you can be involved from your pasture. Right, you have to be peace. You have to have peace in your pasture, and find, where's your ideal pasture? Where's your pasture that you're not going to be constantly having to respond to things because you're not here to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely not our world anymore, like, we're constantly being called to, like, respond or, like, do things that, like, take away the peace, but also, like, it's the dopest world, like, a manifestor has ever been able to experience, because, like, they're, like, cars that move as fast as, like, horses used to, and, like, there's so much technology, and, like, we're watching everything break down, and, like, it's kind of fun to witness.
There's a certain
as an old, like,
You're seeing everyone play Manifestor, and you're going, see how hard it is? You guys were asking for this, and now you have it.
Right. You're breaking down the world we built, and you think you can build a better one. Good luck. Yeah,
and you're not going to be able to, because we know that this is not the time of building a new thing. This is the time of, the plan in the global cycles is ending, right? So, and so that is a great point, that you can take a sort of glee in getting to see all of your great. I mean, manifestors built civilization. Manifestors designed civilization. I mean, we can say the generators built it if you want to cut, you know, if you want to quibble, but not really. I mean, the manifestors initiated the generators into building it and made sure it got built. And made sure if the generators weren't building, they got some new generators in there to finish it. You know?
Right, and it helps that the process of planning and everything that came before it is just like fueling it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do get to witness this incredible. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's really like, I think Bataille, for those who know Bataille, George Bataille, French philosopher, kind of philosopher fiction. He was so right in that, you know, even as early as the 1930s, he was a real surrealist as well. He was writing that we're at this age of tremendous excess where, you know, in the old days, they would do mass slaughter and things like that to get rid of the excess, because he called it the solar excess or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mike? It's the solar. Well, anyway, he said basically he blamed it on the sun. He said because the sun gives us free energy, we always have more energy than we know what to do with on this planet. And so we have to find a way eventually to destroy things. And that there's actually a gleeful waste. And that this, I mean, he foresaw this entire culture of consumption and culture of waste and culture of destruction of the planet. And of course, there's such a crying over the destruction of the planet. But hey, we got like 1,300 years, the whole planet gets destroyed. People would say, well, you should recycle. Well, yeah, if it's going to impact the next 1,300 years. But if we can just put it in a landfill, I mean, that whole landfill is getting destroyed along with every beautiful waterfall and every species and everything there is. It makes it a little more realistic. You know, if you're trying to keep the survival of planet Earth forever, that's not very realistic. That's not very realistic. If you're trying to maintain, right? But if you're trying to keep it for 1,300 years, you can go, okay, well, is this going to cause a big problem in the next 1,300 years? Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Then we should recycle. But if it's not causing a big problem for the next 1,300 years, hey, we're on the way out. I mean, we're all dying. It's like, whoever's seen that great Lars von Trier film, Melancholia, that's what's happening. I mean, we have 1,300 years to get there, but that's a blink of an eye in evolutionary time. So what is important? The decisions we make. What is important? This grand experiment in self-reflected consciousness and the fulfillment of purpose. And that's what we are here to do, is to fulfill our purposes in these lives and the next and the next. And we have a limited window to do that in.
Yeah, and as a fifth line, you're naturally gonna get like the nostalgia goggles, like looking backwards, being like, oh, things were this way, they could have been this way, they could maybe go back to being this way. And like the fifth lines who get burnt at the stake the most, in like my observations, are the ones who are like, let's bring it back to this way because this was working like back 100 or 200 years ago, back when like we weren't mutating ourselves out of like a population increase into a population decrease, right? Like if you look at J.K. Rowling, like she's a 5-1 manifestor. She's like, hey, they're two genders, but she doesn't know like we're headed towards an absolute population decline where we don't have to like, there's gonna be so much like leading towards the human population declining that like you're not, like two genders is not gonna like bring back anything, right? But she's a 5-1 manifestor. She's a dinosaur like me. Like we're kind of like, oh, things used to be really cool. Like maybe they were, but like it's not the way things are gonna be.
Yeah, and there is, right, that's a really important point, is first of all, that as fifth lines we are looking to the past, but then also as a manifestor at a mechanical level, you are here to navigate change. And so I think part of that is maybe the glee I was mentioning, is that it's incredibly stressful for anyone to change. It's incredibly stressful to facilitate change. It's incredibly stressful for change to happen around you and to be a victim of change, or all of this is just a stressful thing. I mean, humans are trying to, from the very earliest civilization, to create a boundary where they cut away all of the nature that keeps encroaching and create a clearing in the forest and maintain that clearing and eradicate anything that goes through the boundary of that clearing, so that they can maintain the semblance of the lack of change. And manifestors have always had the incredibly difficult job of being the facilitators of change. And certain philosophers started realizing this. Nietzsche, Hegel, master-slave dialectic. I mean, the manifestors, the master, right? And all of this stuff about how the fantasy of the master is that they have all the pleasure, but actually they're the ones who have given up pleasure. They're the ones who have set aside their desire because they have the responsibility of facilitating where things are going and navigating into the future, i.e. change. And now that we're going through all these changes, I imagine there's a sort of a glee of all these projectors begging to be at the top of the hierarchy, saying, you're all not recognizing me and not giving me my power. And it's like, yeah, but when we do, you're going to see, and as they get it, be careful what you wish for, right? The projectors who do get the power then realize, oh my word, we now have to facilitate change, but we really can't. We have to actually guide people to just navigate. They aren't here to really facilitate the change. They're here to guide people how to navigate all these changes.
Well, Ross said projectors can't lead.
Sure. And
they can guide. And
yeah.
So it's a totally different way of carrying the world into any sort of future than the way manifestors used to do, because like we don't submit to anyone anymore, right? Like we're not going to submit to a projector, we're not going to submit to a manifestor. So projectors will just be like, hey, this is how the way the world looks like, this is the weather's going to be, and like the cool, like if you get it, you'll maybe like not die.
Yeah. Well, they can help people navigate. I mean, I've seen that projectors can learn the system. I think this also gets to the conversation with Mike, where it really blew my mind thinking about, because I also just, it's like I know psychologically, mentally that change is going to come, but it's like you don't really believe change is going to come until you start seeing it. Then you're like, oh my God, COVID, like the whole world has changed. Like it really can change on a dime, like food shortages, power outages, all these things. And so similarly, when I was talking to Mike, it was so profound and it just really hit me. I just, as a generator, had assumed we build our way out of problems. And we've built all this stuff, and then we just, oh, there's a problem, well, we'll build a solution. But he completely reframed my understanding that as we are at this second great meridian of human history, this great prana, in-breath, out-breath, at the moment of the beginning of the out-breath of the decline of the human population, that decline of the population coincides with the end of building and the beginning of rearranging and repurposing and reusing and finding the best use of the resources we already do have, because there aren't any new resources around the corner. We've used them all. Lithium ends in 3 or 4 years. Well, earthbound. There's going to be lithium extraction from the oceans, which will cause its own chain of effects.
I actually think about that. Sometimes I like...
Sorry, this is the heresy. I don't usually talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
People are like, Jonah, are you a doom and gloom guy? I'm like, no, we'll all be fine. We will be fine. Is this thin ice? Are we getting into some... I mean, do you have any views about post 2027?
No, I actually think the same way. I don't know if it's because like my body's an unconscious like 5, but like I think like, is this lithium ion gonna like carry me through like the cross of planning ending? Like every
we're
time
gonna be using that phone for the next 50 years.
Well, that's what I think. I'm like, because like after a while, like it's just gonna be like what you have to like get you through whatever's there. And
if you want a real glimpse of post 2027, go to Burning Man in a year when it rains. And, before it rains, abundance. Everyone has everything. After it rains, it's like, who has food? Who has water? Like, what are we doing? There's a limited amount of resources and we need to ration them and be careful.
I'm not even like, I'm not survival view. So I'm like, I'll think about stupid
I am survival
things.
view.
I'll be like, I have this album on vinyl, but what if I want to listen to it on the internet when there is no internet? Like, how do I like?
Well, I had a really beautiful moment. This was at the December conference where I was going deep into past lives and some other esoteric subjects. And it was a beautiful moment where I realized about the mutative core and how celebrity is an outer layer of the mutative core. I've talked about this before, how the mutative core is always like an inner circle, even past celebrity, and the celebrities are kind of faced outwards, like they're reaching a wider audience, hence they're further out on the fractal lines. And for those who, I know I'm using a lot of technical terms from wave cosmology, if you're not familiar with fractal lines and things like that, this kind of goes back to the Big Bang and the original crystals of consciousness that are arranged where at the place of impact, at the point of impact, there was a number of hot crystals which continue to reincarnate and drive the cutting edge avant-garde of any moment in history. So in the 1910s and 20s, Carl Jung was hanging out with Einstein and hanging out with Isadora Duncan, the great avant-garde dancer, and Hugo Ball, the founder of Dada, and Hermann Hesse, and all these people were all hanging out together, and probably most of you were there in your past lives, but in any case, that there are these self-organizing mutative cores throughout history. And then the outer edge of that are the ones that get famous or that sort of become the big names, but the inner cores are the mystics and the philosophers who have kind of continued to preserve the knowledge. And they're always friends with celebrities, but not quite celebrities themselves. They gain a smaller circle of celebrity. And then right outside of that is the bigger circle of celebrity, and the bigger and the bigger, and then there's the long tail outside, and one of the things I was realizing was that there's such an idolization of celebrity now, and we're even moving into a global key. One of the new global keys will be ambition, and we're moving from 32, which is the fear of failure, but we're moving to actually 54 and sort of understanding our history as the key to gate 13, I believe, is about through the lens of ambition and so on. And anyway, to make a long story short, I was realizing that right now everyone knows the Beatles. Everyone knows Elvis. Well, actually, even that's kind of already fading. But everyone knows these certain cultural touchstones that are really fading. And there will be a moment 400 years in the future where the very last copy of the very last Beatles record is played on the very last working turntable before it's lost forever to the sands of time. And I hope that John Lennon's reincarnation is there to hear it. That's all I want to say about that. That 400 years in the future, he will have reincarnated as somebody who is like in some Mad Max, Thunderdome future with the goggles and everything's all decrepit and, it's very, we've seen a million images of this. Anyone who's watched, Last of Us or any of these zombie apocalypse, this is where the collective unconscious has already kind of given us the fantasy of what the future will be, and which will eventually, in some form, be a reality. But I just like to think that people make such a big deal about celebrity now. Probably in 100 years, very few people will know who the Beatles are, let alone 400, right? So we take it for granted that there are certain things that are part of our collective Maya that will always be part of our collective Maya, and they won't. And they're going away, and they already are going away, and there are already so many cultural touchstones. It's kind of an old trope of like you grow older and then nobody knows the people that you were into when you were younger. But that's going to happen at such a large scale and an unprecedented scale that we will be shocked at the great diminishing of the variety of experience. That the human experiential way by 2147 will have undergone transits by Pluto and Neptune, completely washing away the old human experience and reinventing it without the diversity of experience. That we're effectively headed to a place where the diversity of experience is diminishing. So now it's like you go to Burning Man, you can do skydiving, you can go to this or that, any of these, but that's all changing. So anyway, as far as the fifth line goes, what we're here to do is to give people practical tools, and we will continue to do that, and in the future to retrieve what we were able to. But as far as the conversation of projectors and manifestors, the projectors are going to be here to see the correct arrangement and the correct orchestration, or the correct, however we want to look at that, the correct curation even. Whereas the manifestors have a very different role. And I guess, as you're saying, it's you're off the clock now.
Maybe, but like celebrity is a byproduct of the cross of planning, in the sense that it's a luxury, right? Like if you have all these institutions, you can indulge in like, oh, look who is doing such and such. But when it comes to the cross of the sleeping phoenix, right? So that kind of celebrity will actually be those with like probably integration circuitry or manifestors, or be like, oh, I heard such and such survived this entire like attack, or like this the people who used to be celebrities like a long time ago will again sort of like, it's the value will be different because it's not about details, it's not about lineage. Like there won't, like we barely can name all the Kennedys now. Like it's the celebrity is changing.
Yeah, and status.
And even with Gen Z, their celebrities, like they don't know our celebrities. Like for millennials, and like they have a totally different set of like who's who and who's important and impactful to them.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of it will be understanding history in the future through the lens of ambition. And so, it's just interesting to me. I guess the two contexts were kind of going between are the context of what is the fifth line's role, and then the manifestor versus the projector versus generator and so on. And I guess my only point there is just that although manifestors may be off the clock, I do still see manifestors having impact. I am personally impacted by manifestors, and it helps me fulfill my life purpose. And as a fifth line, part of my life purpose is seeing what is valuable from the past that will help us in the future.
And fifth line will be off the clock soon, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we are already the 5 doesn't have any resonance to the global cycle. The 1 does.
I do feel irrelevant.
Yeah, but our first line, at least, people appreciate our. All right, should we open it up to any? Let's open it up to any questions, comments. Mike,
What does it mean to have an impact in a pasture?
what does it mean to have an impact in a pasture? Well, I can answer that. Alok Diaz, in his pasture, had a huge impact on a lot of people today. His talk really profoundly impacted people. And so the pasture
And he said
is,
it's not work what he's doing, right?
yeah, he said it's not
Yeah,
work. And he's really
having
engaging
fun.
with people. He
Yeah,
does it right.
wants
He
to
is-
do it in a good way.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really, when he's really engaging with someone, it's really fulfilling it in a deep way. And so, so the pasture just refers to they no longer have to sit in the throne room. They no longer have to deal with everyone coming to them and asking for their leadership of what decision to make in that regard.
It's like being an elder. in
It's
a
like
way.
being an elder. Yeah,
that's what it
thank you,
feels like.
Stephanie.
I just keep
Yeah.
feeling that.
Yeah, Stephanie's.
So
I'm an
without the
elder.
throne,
That-
without the
that-
money, without the
Yeah, but you
respect.
just get to-
without-
I think manifestors have, from my perspective, a lot of, yeah. Or, it could just be, I mean, it's an interesting question because how many manifestors now in previous incarnations were manifestors? Do they get to be a manifestor now because, is there some sort of divine justice where they get to be a manifestor because they were a manifestor? Or is it their first life being a manifestor and they were generators and now they get to be a manifestor when they don't have to work, but they can now fulfill a purpose, because we all do have a purpose through our incarnation cross. In some sense, the purpose of the manifestor in the past was probably more linked to the program and the building of civilization as it was. And now that the purpose of the manifestor is actually the development, is much more personal. Something I really liked that, Alok Diaz said is that everything for him is personal. And it's so funny because we would imagine the projector is the most personal type, or that type has something to do with being personal, but it's not. And it could just be what your particular life is about in this life. Some people are really working to help transform. I mean, that was something beautiful, Alex said earlier, was that he thought there's a lot of harm in the move towards the professionalism of human design. Now, at the same time, he can be highly critical of those who, he said, were like waving their spiritual knife like a surgeon, not really having the training and cutting people up and so on. But at the same time, I think he was talking about what he appreciated about early human design was that it really was about the spirit. And that's a word that a lot of analysts don't use. And if you're frustrated, you have a frustrated spirit. And if you're angry, you have an angry spirit. And that the spirit is what it's really about. And so for a manifestor in the old days who is so busy building and running kingdoms, they may not have had a lifetime of delving into matters of spirit. Right?
I beg to differ, because the thing with the closed aura is that because we don't get like the conditioning from the projector and the there is an ability to tap into what you like. I describe it as the indie rock spirit. So like it's like the weirdness, and you're like, what the fuck? Why is that person? Oh, they're a manifestor. Oh, that makes sense. Like it's that like they're not really phased by the conditioning of people, but they are by the conditioning of the transits, and that's what makes them kind of like weird, for lack of a better word.
Sure. I understand the not being phased, but there is still, I guess my only point is, if we think about a series of lifetimes, and we think of somebody who was a manifestor king in ancient times, and then a manifestor leader of industry in another time, and someone who created all the railroads in Europe, or somebody who, all of these great big projects, the manifestor who built the wall of China, all of these great emperors and empresses and people throughout history who have built everything. And then the question of, why would they come back as a manifestor now? Why do we still have manifestors? Well, I think when you're doing that, you don't necessarily have the hours in the day like Alok to delve into spending 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day sometimes helping people grow and learn and personally transform their lives and feeling the tremendous joy of touching so many lives. I'm not saying about whether he's impacted by them or not. Yes, he has his primary relationship to the cosmos, but yeah, and that's my only point there is that, and still, manifestors are still going to either have the angry manifestor come out around a dense, not self-resistance field because of not being in their pasture, being too surrounded by, surrounded by people who don't get it. Or, I see the pasture as really just, it's almost like the fifth line moving to the sixth line. It's kind of like, okay, you've done your job, you've been leaders for so long, now you get to kind of have your safe place where you can still impact, you can still touch people's lives, but now you get to have that personal experience. What I've heard from a lot of manifestors is feeling outside of the personal experience. This even goes back to Nietzsche and Hegel, master-slave dialectic, how all the master really wants is to be able to sit with the slaves and break bread, but they've never been able to, and all the slaves are jealous of them and have all the resentment, thinking that they get all the pleasure while the slave has to work, but really the slaves get all the pleasure breaking bread with themselves. Well, now is the manifestor's time to break bread. And I've broken bread with you, and you've been breaking bread with everyone. There's nine-centered communion. We break bread. We're breaking bread right now.
Right.
So you're no longer on the clock to make sure that the big projects get done. Now the big projects are done, and they're all crumbling, and you're just laughing about it because you're seeing how the entire old world that you've and other manifestors have been instrumental in building is falling away. But I also do think we change type life after life. I don't think we stay the same type. Otherwise, how would there be projectors unless it was all of their first incarnation? Which is an interesting thought experiment.
That's my belief.
I wondered that. I wondered, baby Mike, But
No, he's a base one. He can't be. That's not
he
possible.
can't be a baby. Yeah. He's been here a long time. No, I've always wondered that these are the things my open head thinks about. And I'm not working, so, which is very little.
I feel complete. How do you feel?
Oh, this is wonderful. We have broken bread.
Yeah, as much as we can.
You might not have eaten the bread, and I'm gluten-free, but we've broken bread. So okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Please join at the main stage. I know James still has his talk there, wrapping up, and then we have Teo Montoya. I'm personally going to be heading to the main stage. Very excited about that. We have schedules on the table, and you can check out what else is going on. There's a lot of stuff today, and it's Amanda's birthday. Happy birthday, Amanda! All right, let's hear it for Singh. All right, and we'll be doing charades later.
We took class together, virtually.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'll
So
also
I thought
we will be
I
doing
would-
charades at some
It was
point.
my
Talk
birthday
to
yesterday.
me to get the info on that. Apparently, am I breaking a surprise right here? Is this part of the surprise? Okay, we're doing charades tonight. So we have to figure out what time works for you.
Okay.
But
Yeah, anytime.
okay. Well, I'm gonna head back here just right after the thing, and we'll do it. So, all right. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. That was a lot of fun.
I just want to say
On the
thank you
kitchen
for
table,
that
table,
whole
glass table.
bling thing. That was the bling, having the
accessorizing?
Yes, it just
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
I recommend it just because it's anything to divert the attention.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, and it's just
Especially if you deal with